Hi, I'm Carrie Penny, and on this episode of Secret Heart Broadcasting, I'll be speaking with Dr. Jennifer Salahub, an art historian and a delightful speaker who's going to answer my question, how did the human heart, this little muscular pump, come to represent love, and how did it morph into the shape we all know and love? So if you're as curious as I am about the evolution of the human heart, then this episode is definitely for you. Welcome to Secret Heart Broadcasting. I'm Carrie Penny, and on today's episode, I am so thrilled to be talking to Dr. Jennifer Salahub, an art historian, an educator, a decorative arts detective, perhaps, about the heart and how the heart came to mean love. So I know this is going to be a rich and entertaining conversation, Jennifer, but before we get to the heart of the matter, I just wanted to say thank you so much for saying yes. I am thrilled that through our mutual friend, Sandra Sawatsky, we were able to connect, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with you today.
Well, I am equally excited. It's like having a fixed audience. You can't escape. I have retired. I'm not really teaching anymore. I'm a professor emerita, which means I really miss my students. I really miss telling people things. I can't even shop properly anymore because I used to be able to buy really weird things and say to myself, this is so my students will know this. Look, my students will understand what this is, and I will explain to them about indigenous art, not necessarily the heart. Now I can't buy all these wonderful, marvelous things because I have no excuse and I have no room.
Tell us how you got into this, because you're probably by nature a very curious person.
I am. Curiosity is, I guess, so not necessarily my middle name. I've got many middle names. My dad was in paint and wallpaper and interior design. And I had always been interested in interior design. I'd always been interested in textiles. My mom's parents were tailors, so buttons were my life. All right, I got to sort buttons. And I might have told you at one point, I think just to calm me down, my mother spent her whole life saying, just calm down. They would let me play with the button jar. And it was a big bag of buttons, and I would sort them. And that was a treat. But I'm sure it was just to keep me out of her hair. So buttons, pattern, wallpaper, these were all things I loved. So I finished off sort of grade 12 in Ontario, and then I went off to New York and studied interior design. Reason being is I never thought I'd have enough French to get into university. And then I did 1 year at university. I took Spanish. I took 1 year at university and did art history, got married, and started moving around with my husband. And so our first residence after Montreal was Brighton in England. And I worked in a paint and wallpaper store. And my sister's older than I, we both have suitcases that hold wallpaper because we're always bringing home wallpaper. We like pattern, decoration. And when we moved back to Canada, we moved to the States first, where I was an alien spouse, right? As an alien spouse, I wasn't allowed to work in Baltimore or in Schenectady. So I worked in the historical societies, and I worked with decorative arts, and I worked with textiles and samplers, and I loved it. Then when we moved to Montreal, I finished off my undergraduate degree in Canadian art history at Concordia. I did a degree a decade. You cannot rush these things, right? And then I did my master's in Canadian art history, and I had an incredible mentor and head of the department, Laurier Lacroix, who said, well, yes, art also includes embroidery and textiles, not just painting. And so I was able to go down a textile route at that point. I even did textile chemistry at McGill. The thing you have to realize about Canadian art and Canadian art history, it's a recent phenomenon. It's a recent occupation. We didn't have Canadian art history. It was just assumed to be American or British until about the 60s, 1960s. So looking and studying Canadian art history or Canadian textile history was never easy just going to the library. There were not books on it. So you become a detective. All right. And for instance, I was doing embroidery, Canadian embroidery. And in those days, we used to have the Library Congress listings. And I had to look up embroidery under the letter W.
Why?
Women's work. It was not listed under needlework or embroidery. It was only listed under W for women's work. All right, that was right straight through the 80s. And so you had the science and engineering library held all the textile books because they were considered science. They weren't considered art. So I've always had this aptitude for pattern and decoration during a period when pattern and decoration is a bad word. Right? If you look at interiors now, they're just saying, wow, pattern, how exciting. You can introduce a pillow to your house. And I keep thinking, yippity, won't go any further than that. I want more than a pillow. I want lots of pattern and decoration. And that's how I got into it. And so then I was doing my undergrad. I did my graduate. I started teaching. I started teaching decorative arts, art history. And then when we moved to Calgary, I was allowed to also teach craft history, which made 2 craft historians in Canada.
You've been on the leading edge of this, and then this whole kind of movement from women's work to art.
Oh yeah, it's what I'm okay. I'm an art historian. I'm a craft historian. I love history. I love delving down rabbit holes. And what I discovered is that in the 1900s, the period of modern art, all right, and modernity in Canada, right, it's brand new, it's exciting, it's a new world. We don't look back. We're not caring about tradition. We're looking forward. And so what you discover is the art history books that were written in the 60s sort of believed there was no history behind them. I mean, it was going to be about painting. It's moving forward. We're part of the group of 7 in the 20s. We want to go forward. And they're not going to talk about craft. Bentley Mays, the critic for the Globe and Mail back in the 80s, sort of said, well, we don't look at craft because it's not art. Period. The end. Don't look at it. Stand back. Nothing to see here. And people believe that. So what I'm doing is I go back into the archives and I discover stuff that was really well known and popular in the 30s or the 40s or even the 50s, but it has been dismissed from art history because it was craft or pattern or wasn't two-dimensional as we wanted with, the art of the mid-60s with Clement Greenberg. It just wasn't modern.
I'm having an angry feeling because it seems like this is very dismissive of women's work and women's art, and so recently.
Well, yeah, this is it. It's like having my students come into class and sort of looking at women's art and textiles and discovering that we're going to talk about it seriously has been marvelous. Right. And I had some of the best classes at AU Arts, which was ACAD when I'm teaching there a few years ago, because my students would come in and they would be almost embarrassed that they were excited about craft. They were taking it, they were doing it, they were loving it, but who did they talk to? And I taught craft history at the graduate level as well. And I would send my students out and I would say, okay, I want you to go out and I want you to interview 5 people or 10 people. And I just said, I want you to say to them, what do you think of when you think of craft? And many would come back with macaroni and cheese, right? So I think ACAD was all about teaching attitude. And my students left there with attitude.
Very nicely done. In addition to this, kind of very rich pursuit of pattern and craft and advocating for women's work in your career, you also have this fascination with iconography. And I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about that. What is an icon and how does something come to mean something else?
All right. So what we're doing, like today, you've asked me about the human heart, right? Or the heart. And I think we have 2 questions. And the first question would be, when did the heart become associated with love or emotion? And the second question, which is the one you asked me, which is, how did that shape suddenly become the heart? Because it doesn't look like a heart. We've all had a chicken heart. I mean, if nothing else, we've seen them. All right. So iconography is simply the study of signs and symbols in art. Now, to be an icon, well, we talk about icons all the day because all the time today because of our computers. But in the history of art, symbols had specific meanings. The same way that I don't have to explain to you that if you see a red hexagon on a corner, you will stop your car. All right. I don't have to explain to you why the shape is unusual and not like nature, and that's why we're going to see it, or the color is really bright and it doesn't look like nature, and that's why we're going to notice it. We know it means stop. All right. And the same thing was happening in art history. And whether it's medieval, whether it's Egyptian, they had to have shorthand. All right. And they would make shorthand. So saints, for instance, have attributes. And you know certain saints by certain attributes. So St. Patrick, you probably can tell me right now what his attribute would be.
I would say a shamrock or a snake, maybe.
Or a snake, yes, because he chased all the snakes out of Ireland. Absolute snake in one hand, shamrock in the other. And so what we do is when I start teaching iconography, and this is for art, all right, and it would be iconography is sort of 3 levels, and it's called pre-iconographic, iconographic, and iconological, right? So the pre-iconographic is what do you see, all right? So for instance, if you saw a man on the street and he lifts his hat, all right, so that's what you see, and you would say, well, what are you seeing? I'm seeing a man lifting his hat. Right, pre-iconographic. Iconographic means what does it mean? Well, depending on your age, you'll know that he's probably being polite. All right, he's just lifting. It's a greeting, whether it's a cowboy hat, whether it's a ball cap, he just taps it. It's a greeting. All right, but why here? Why now? All right, and so then you have to go back further, and you have to look at the history of this and where does it come from. And so, in fact, it goes back to the Middle Ages when everybody was, not everyone, but the men were in full armor with visors. Right. And how do you know who anyone is? And it was sort of like lift up my visor and say, for heaven's sakes, I'm your brother. Right. Put down the visor. We're not fighting. It's the other guys you want to shoot. So when we look at iconography and we look at, what does the heart mean? When does it mean something? We have specific meanings. St. Augustine is represented by the heart. Christ might have the flaming heart. We'll talk about that too. So there's different kinds of hearts.
This is my little talisman heart I keep with me at most times. And it's made of, I don't know, maybe it's agate. It kind of looks like wood to me. But I use it as a talisman, or I might hold it to my heart. But it's a shape that bears no resemblance to the little muscular pump that is right now beating in my heart. How on earth did that happen?
All right. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history because this is where my art history comes out.
Yay! My daughter's an historian. I love this.
All right. The heart as an organ of importance. All right. So it was important. So we know that in the Egyptian times, when you died, your heart was weighed against the feather of truth and justice. All right. So we've got lots of books, papyrus illustrations from the Book of the Dead, which will have the dog-faced God and a lovely little scale, which we would now look at and think if we see a scale, we go,
justice.
Absolutely. So this was the scale of justice and truth and the feather. And so the feather was weighed against the heart. The heart's in a little canopic jar. You don't see the heart. It's in like the other organs, it's in a jar. And the feather is put there and they see how many sins this person has done. And if the heart outweighs the feather, you get to die again and be eaten. All right. But the main thing, a little bit. All right. So the main thing is that it's this, they recognize it as a source of intelligence. They saw it as a source of emotion. They saw the heart as something really important. Right. And that's where we're sort of going back. And that we're looking at, 1000 BC, 2000 BC. All right. So that sort of a heart was associated with emotions. When we get to the Greek and Roman world, all right, we start to see that the heart is still an important organ. Hippocrates felt that it was important, but it wasn't the most powerful organ. He felt the brain was the most powerful organ, and that people that thought it was the heart were mistaken.
Well, there's that between heart and head.
And Plato proposed that the heart was thymos, which is sort of the center of our morality. It is our spirit. It circulates our blood and it controls our emotions. So we're getting there. Emotions, volition, motivation, that's the heart. Aristotle, so we're looking at, 5th century BC, 4th century BC, and we get to Aristotle and he goes, it was the heart, not the brain, that is the seat of spiritual and mental functions. All right. So we've got this notion that it's the heart that's important. In the Roman period, we actually know that we start seeing images of the Venus of goddess of love and her son Cupid. All right. For setting hearts on fire and flaming hearts. All right. So that's sort of aiming it at human hearts. The ancient Romans actually had a really great belief that there is a vein from the 4th finger of your hand directly to your heart. which is why the British in the sacrament of marriage in the Middle Ages insisted that the ring fits on this finger because that's directly related to the heart.
Wow.
Yeah, very cool. The heart also evolved at the same time as simply a pattern, a decoration. It's pretty. It's like diamonds, it's squares, it's a nice geometric pattern. And we see it in art as we look at them and say, oh, look, hearts. They're probably ivy leaves. All right. Or even in the ancient world in Libya, so Greek and Roman city in Libya had their silver coins, and on one side it's got a heart. And on the other side, it's got a plant. And the plant is, in fact, Siphium. And Siphium is an extinct plant that was used, it was traded across the Middle East, around the known world. It was exceedingly, you became very wealthy by trading it. It's an extinct species, sort of a large fennel. It was also, so it was just there because it was such an important monetary item for trade. So it's on the coin. Now, I could also say it was used for contraception. All right. And therefore, we could sort of extrapolate from that today, not then, today going, ooh, that must mean it was all about the money. It was all about heart. It was all about love. But it's not. It's just a pattern at that point. All right. But I mean, this is sort of like you have to be really kind of careful when you start to read things. You have to have proof. You can't just keep going, ooh, this would go. All right. So we sort of get our little ivy, we get our fig leaves. Oh, but ivy is also quite cool. Ivy often symbolizes, because it twines and holds on to things, it's often sort of seen as fidelity. All right.
Okay.
And so this is why it could also be, the heart could be like the ivy leaf. For instance, going for an aside now, another little art history story, there's a lovely painting from 1434 by Jan van Eyck of Arnolfini wedding. And the Arnolfini wedding has got the man, one of my students pointed out looked like Putin, the man and his wife holding hands, and in front of them is a little dog, and a little fuzzy dog on the floor. And he's got his hand up, right, gesture, and it's a morganatic wedding, which means he is marrying somebody much beneath him socially. And as long as she gets pregnant and has babies, they will remain married. But if she doesn't, then they just separate. It's fine. It's a morganatic wedding. She will get goodies, and she will get land, and she will get money, which means she'll get a better marriage after all. She just won't be a virgin. That's all. Anyways, this was this lovely couple and this little dog. And they sort of say, well, how do you know it's a wedding? Well, of course it's a wedding because it has a small dog, that dog.
I don't understand.
A dog is Fido. We know Fido, and Fido is fidelity.
Oh, okay.
All right, which is why the Fido phone company is Fido, because it's fidelity. So again, this is the art history kind of reading these things, whether you mean to or not. So we get ivy, we get figs, we get water lilies. That shape becomes the heart shape. All right. So sacred and secular times for the hearts, they show up deep religious meaning for the heart. For instance, in the Bible, there's many references to sort of heart and love. Okay, so for instance, in the Old Testament, in the book of Samuel, I'm paraphrasing here, the Lord sort of says unto him, look not at his countenance, a face, nor his stature, how big he is, how great he is. Well, you might look to these kind of characteristics to see something. He says, you must look to the heart. All right. In other words, it's going to be the inner qualities, the heart qualities. So for iconography, when it's carried by a saint, it is a symbol. The heart is a symbol of love or piety. If it's a flaming heart, it's religious fervor, like St. Augustine. If it's pierced by an arrow, that means deep repentance and devotion. Now we'll see that kind of translate into Valentine's, but that was deep repentance and devotion. The Sacred Heart of Jesus was a sect. There's numerous paintings with the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And then also with charity or caritas, and that's what I quite like. Caritas is charity. And in the words of St. Paul, right? And now abideth faith, hope, and charity. We know faith, hope, and charity. All right. But the greatest of these is charity. And that's where we start to see paintings of charity holding a heart. Now, when Giotto paints, Giotto is a pre-Renaissance, early Renaissance artist from Italy, does frescoes, 1305, 1330s in there. In 1305, he has a painting of Charity. Charity is raising up her heart and she's holding it up. She's giving her heart to God or to Jesus. And there's an aorta coming out the bottom of it.
Oh, okay.
So it really is a heart. And then what we see, there's another painting that he did a little later that's got written on the word amor, right? Love. Cupid is there with these claw-like feet, blindfolded with a whole string of hearts around, like trophies around his neck. Really quite terrifying and ugly. But it's this idea that, and he's blindfolded, so love is blind, it's irrational, it makes no sense. He's just shooting arrows into these people and driving people crazy. But this is like, but they're all like these little, they look like little chicken hearts or pork hearts. All right. But it's not heart-shaped yet. It's just heart, but it's associated with love, right? Love of God, but it's not the heart shape that we know. In fact, these early ones look like pine cones or pears. And if you're looking at these little hearts that they're holding up, okay. But they express love, but not yet in its iconic form. It's going to be in Northern Europe, in Flanders, France, that we start to see the heart that is shaped the way we expect it to be, all right? And that's because of courtly love. And courtly love shows up in poems, in poetry. Love gets talked about in the Greeks and the Romans as well, because don't forget the Renaissance is about rebirth of the Roman and the Greek thought. So that's where they're going to have Cupid again, sort of brings it up. The North is not as interested in the Renaissance, in the rebirth, but what they're interested in is sort of details, etc. So they have some of the same myths, same ideas, but they're going to represent it in different ways. Detail is going to be important. And we start to see these sort of heart-shaped things. So courtly love was all about pledging a male, pledging his heart to only one woman with the promise that he would love her forever. All right. He would sing to her. He'd write poets to her. He would sing his heart out in her presence. She could be married. All right. This does not mean they were going to have an affair, although some of them do, Abelard and Heloise. The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts. All right. The Knave of Hearts, he stole the tarts. The King of Hearts was not happy about that. All right. And beat him up. So, I mean, it's our nursery rhymes. It's coming from this time. I can see you sort of thinking all the way through the poem. Yeah. Okay, good. But it is this idea. It's the king. It's the troubadour. It's the cuckolded husband, perhaps. All right. Or not. But this is all about courtly love, true love, fine love. And we start to see wonderful stories in illuminated manuscripts, small little drawings of stories about the heart. And one of my favorite is The Romance of the Pear. All right. And there's this lovely picture of a young man holding out, it looks like a pear, to a woman who is looking quite disdainful. And it's a story of the man giving his heart to this woman. But you have to know the story in a great more detail. If you read the book, you realize that this young man is not giving his heart to this woman. He's giving another man's heart to this woman. Because this woman is not the recipient of the heart. She's supposed to give it to the lady that the first guy, the other man, saw in a garden and fell in love with. And the story of the pear is she had peeled her pear, had taken a bite out of it when he saw her for the first time, and she gave him the pear, and he lost his heart. So he's given his heart to a young man to give to her maidservant to pass to her. And eventually there's all these tests and tasks that he has to do to prove his love. And eventually, because it's a romance, Cupid will use his arrow and she will fall in love with him too.
This sounds very operatic.
It does, doesn't it? It's good that I can't sing. All right. One of my favorite drawings is from the 14th century, and it's an anatomical drawing. And it is one of the first doctors to use anatomical drawings, and it's in Italy, and it's got this very strange male body, man. And lo and behold, there's this teeny tiny little Valentine for the heart. For the first time, it doesn't look like a real heart. So this is an anatomical drawing that's actually using the Valentine, I'll just call that our heart shape, for the heart. And I think it's the fact that he's influenced by the artists rather than his own anatomical drawings, which becomes just sort of how prevalent that heart is. There's books that are heart-shaped. There are heart offerings. There's a lovely illuminated manuscript of two women with a net trying to catch flying hearts.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, you could have. I
Yeah,
mean, it's really,
yeah. The hearts, because the hearts have the little leaves, wings on them. Yeah.
so it's really quite nice. There starts to be tokens, ivory hearts. There can be gifts of hearts, tapestries with hearts. I was in France recently, and I've been sort of looking at tapestries. That's one of my areas. And sort of now I have to go back and look at things and look at hearts. And this question is something I'd never considered before about the heart. And I'm sitting here, I'm looking across the room, and way back when we lived in Montreal and I was studying historic samplers, I made a sampler. It's a picture of my house. It's a picture of two little birds, and above them are hearts. All right. I have hearts in my sampler because this was my home. So something I embroidered, but I had not seen those hearts till just now as I'm looking at them. So it's kind of embarrassing.
Wow. So hearts are so prevalent. We see them almost without seeing them now.
You don't see them anymore. That's the interesting thing. And you certainly would. So playing cards, hearts.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Different countries, we have like the clubs, the spades, the hearts, the diamonds. But that's not everywhere. All right. If you look at the tarot cards, you can see other suits. All right. But they were meant to be they were standardized, and they represent or symbolize different things. So spades symbolized nobility or the warriors, spades, all right, which is associated with institutions and the struggle of life, all right. Diamonds represent money, represent the merchant class, wealth creation, financial success. This is all Middle Ages. It's not earlier than that. Clubs represent the peasants, those that have to work, symbolizing work, knowledge, the pursuit of learning. And the hearts represent the clergy. Again, that concept of love of God, emotion, and the struggle for inner joy. All right. So those little cards are inner joy. When I was in Europe this summer, we spent a week in Oslo. My husband was at conferences. I get to play. I was at the Decorative Arts Museum and the art museums. And if you start to think about IKEA, Sweden, or the or Oslo or Helsinki, you start to see hearts. All right. When you go to IKEA at Christmas, everything is hearts. All right. And it really was seeing the Scandinavian hearts are visual metaphors. Obviously, they've picked them up from the 13th century, but they really see them now as their own Scandinavian, a metaphorical meaning for love, for unity, for heritage. They see it as their heritage. And so when I was in Norway, in Oslo, I fell in love with brown cheese and waffles. Right? I know. I went to the museum. To me, art galleries are my safe space. They always have washrooms, they have food, and they have a gift shop, and they have art, right? So I went to the coffee shop, I got my tea, and then they had these waffles with brown cheese, not good for people with lactose intolerance, brown cheese, and the waffles are all heart-shaped. They have a heart-shaped waffle maker. So I was getting these heart-shaped waffles, which they put the brown cheese on, then they fold. And so that was quite exciting, and it was quite nice. And the Scandinavian countries are exceedingly expensive, but I went to a glass studio. And in the studio, the women were making incredible works of art. And in the corner, there was this. All right. It's a piece of glass. What it is they have got antique, old, cast iron waffle makers. You open up the waffle maker, you pour in your batter, you close your waffle maker. It's hot, it's cast iron. You open it up and it's cooked, right? You've got your waffle. They were putting in glass and framing, making glass waffles. This is the only thing I bought in Scandinavia was my very own glass waffle. Anyways, so it's just this idea. And then I'm going through my pictures just to see how many hearts I have in my photographs. and I came across my last heart I will tell you about. Um, have you been to Mundare,
In Alberta?
Alberta? Have you met the largest Mundare sausage, which is humongous, a Ukrainian sausage? And at the bottom of it, there's I would say maybe a 3-meter heart that gives the history of the Mundare sausage. And I just thought, okay, it's made it everywhere. If it's like, I love that Ukrainian kubla saw.
Me too.
So we've come through, we don't even see it anymore. And I'm sure they're not looking at it as, they're just seeing it as and then I didn't even talk about Valentine's.
It's a very odd holiday, right? Because especially, how I grew up, there's not a lot of time for like, and I love you. It's like, work harder.
It kind of goes back to St. Valentine. St. Valentine's Day is actually the February the 14th, but he really had very little to do with love. In fact, his kind of history and iconography is sort of ugly and bad. But this idea of dedicating one day to love. All right. And this was happening. And what happens is we had individual Valentine's presents being given. But with the 18th century technical revolution, we start to get new printing techniques. And we have printing, and we're able to make inexpensive prints. And we can actually make cards. We can hand color them. We can do color lithography at some point. So in the 19th century, we start to see the passing of giving Valentines, of giving hearts, of giving things. Now, the Victorian age in England is the Victorian age is a very sentimental age, and hearts show up in all sorts of places. So when I was looking at hearts in the Victorian age, I was looking at mourning jewelry.
Mourning.
Yes, exactly. MOUR, mourning. So there's rules about mourning that were put in place in the Victorian era. I mean, it wasn't that they passed in Parliament, but everyone knew how long you were to wear black. Everyone knew what kind of black you were to wear. You couldn't wear shiny black. You had to wear matte black. You had to wear crepe, because crepe is woven from silk, which would be shiny. But if you twist it really tight, like your hair, gets it curly, it loses its shine and you weave it. So crepe was all right. Just don't wash it because it shrinks. So you've got your mourning black, and then you would go out to less black, and eventually you could go into lavender. But you would also wear mourning jewelry. And mourning jewelry was often made out of bog oak, which is a dull black because you couldn't wear shiny black beads. And it was often made out of hair. All right. So hair of the person that had died. But it wasn't just for mourning. You could wear hair at other times. I've done a lot of work on. It's kind of scary. I've done a lot of work on hair and wax. And one of my friends sort of looked at me slightly horrified and said, as in like body taking off wax? She just assumed I was sort of going off and looking at having my legs waxed.
For academic purposes.
For academic purposes, exactly. The nuns were making things out of wax, and they were also making things out of hair, because you could send your hair to a jeweler and they would weave it for you and they would put the gold clasps on it. But how would you know that you were getting your hair back? How do you know it wasn't just someone else's hair that they were just giving you back? So, but you could trust nuns. If you couldn't trust nuns, who could you trust? So the nuns had a really good business. All the different convents in Quebec were making this hair jewelry and braiding, and they have wonderful pattern books and things. And so, but the heart becomes really important with the mourning jewelry. Yeah. And then I have a lovely painting of, I don't have it, of, oh God, I hadn't thought of it, Queen Elizabeth I. So we're looking at the 16th century, was a woman who said, I know I've got the weak body of a female, but I have the heart of a man and a warrior, right? And so that's how she sold herself, as young, as strong, as virile, everything. But her dresses were absolutely laden with symbolism. They're such fun. So there's one dress that's called the Rainbow Portrait, because you can't have a rainbow without the sun. And the queen is the sun, right? So she's got a rainbow. Her dress is covered with eyes and ears embroidered. She sees everything and she hears everything. Do not try to cross her. And then on her sleeve, she's got this gorgeous serpent, all right? Wisdom. Serpents are considered very wise. And in its mouth, a heart. So she's only wise and she's a woman, soft and love.
So is this how that phrase, I wear my heart on my sleeve, came to be?
Not exact, but yes, exactly that. But it wasn't from that point. But this idea that you're wearing your heart on the sleeve, the idea that people know your emotions, that there's you can see them, you can tell that you're in love, you can tell that you don't have to sort of figure out what's happening. You're wearing your heart on your sleeve, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's really bad because you can be hurt. In 1976, what we have is a revolution in heart. Um, in 1976, Milton Glaser presents a rebranding to the people of New York City. And that is the I Love New York sign that we all know so well. That was the first time it was used. New York was in the doldrums. They were having high crime. The streets were filthy. And this was this idea of bringing back pride. So this was this incredible I love New York. And it's the first time it became a verb. Right? So this idea of a rebus, a picture that stands in for something else. It's a verb. I love New York. And we see it everywhere now. In 1999, the first emojis were introduced. There were something like 37 emojis, 5 of which dealt with the heart, one of which had a broken heart. And I went through my recipe box. I have made broken heart cookies, it turns out, since the 80s. My girlfriend gave me the recipe. I still have the recipe card. It's all filthy and disgusting. And what you do is you make your little heart cookie, and then you sort of do a little jagged edge, and you kind of separate it a little bit, and then you've got these broken heart cookies. And I would make them every time I would have my heart broken or I'd be annoyed. And my husband, I don't think, ever noticed.
They're delicious.
Yes, exactly. Crunchy. Anyway, so yes, broken heart cookies. So then I went online and discovered you can actually buy broken heart cookie cutters.
What? I collect cookie cutters.
Yeah, I was kind of like, huh. But anyways, I still make my own broken heart cookies.
What this conversation for me, where I became really curious, and we've already kind of covered that medieval time, but it's two women handing each other a heart, and it's a gooey anatomical kind of heart. And would that be like a friendship love in that way? I don't know if you've seen that image.
I haven't seen that image. And depending on when it was made, all right. So you're going to find like conceptual art, you're going to find people sort of politically sort of pushing things. So it could be love between two women. It could be sort of ironic. The heart, the bleeding heart, the real heart is there. It could simply be a statement of what is a heart and why does it mean love. So I'd have to see it to be able to sort of analyze it further. But it sounds interesting.
And what about this? So we talked about, you mentioned in there bleeding heart. Like, is that, and I mean, I think everyone in North America grows bleeding heart bushes, but that comes to be someone who's like too sensitive.
Yes, too sensitive. And if you are my mother introduced me to bleeding hearts when I was very young, the plant, and they're a naked lady in the bathtub. If you take your little bleeding heart and you pull it very gently, suddenly you've got this little silhouette of a woman with her little arms down in a bathtub. And that was a naked lady in a tub. And that was sort of my introduction to not quite dirty jokes, but darn near close when I was that age.
I have never, okay, so next spring or summer when my bleeding hearts, I'm going to try that because I knew about tearing the flower apart and creating a story, but I'd never seen.
No, just sort of, just a little bit and it can close it up again. But there we are, just this idea that yes, yeah. So the idea of the heart taking on all these different characteristics and depending on the situation, and that's the same thing with semiotics, depending on the situation. So, I mean, I've got, as I looked around to prepare for this, as I said to you, I don't collect hearts. And it reminded me immediately of I don't collect acorns. One year, my niece, my sister's family's all in Texas. And one year my niece came to visit me. She's an adult, came up, visited, had some time with me, went home. And then for Christmas sent me a gold necklace or a little charm. And I phoned my sister and I said, it looks like an acorn, right? And she said, well, it is an acorn. You collect acorns. And I said, I do not collect acorns. She goes, well, Deborah thinks you collect acorns. I said, well, I don't. I don't collect acorns. All right. So I hang up, I turn around, and in my dining room at Christmas, I have sort of a modern sort of chandelier. I have 4 large mercury glass acorns that I take out at Christmas and I hang on my chandelier. Oh, yeah, okay. I turn around, I look at my chairs. My chairs that I have recovered with William Morris fabric are, okay, acorns. I walk into the kitchen. My cookie jar is a huge acorn. Beside the bed in the guest room is a bowl of acorns. Well, that's how I feel about these hearts. I don't collect hearts, but as I'm sitting here, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you count the rock I picked up on a beach in Rhodes because it looked like a heart, 6 hearts. How did that happen?
In just plain view.
Yeah.
Well, when I started this podcast, Secret Heart, I sort of thought that we all have this inner, my sister would call it inner GPS, but an inner knowing that is always there and always beating and sometimes whispering and sometimes yelling. And if we can just still ourselves and tune into Secret Heart, we know, we maybe get a sense of what direction we should be moving in our lives. I don't even know if there's a question there, Jennifer, but I guess if there was, it's around the heart also having a knowledge to it. The heart is a knowing organ.
Absolutely. And that's when you're going back sort of to Plato and Aristotle, when they're saying it's the area of reason, it's the area of emotions. It's sort of like you really have to read it. All right. You have to be aware of it. Doesn't mean you're supposed to listen to the voices.
If you're a saint, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. Yes.
To me, it has a feminine kind of presence. And I don't know if that's documentable kind of as we look back at art history, but I find it a very feminine symbol, which is why I'm attracted to it.
It is. And it's soft. All right. So some will say that it in fact is breasts. All right. Others will flip it and say, no, it's the buttocks. All right. So that it's actually sort of an anatomical, but it's this idea that it's usually comes to us as it's feminine. It's this idea of nurturing. It's this idea of warmth and family and sort of qualities that have been ascribed to women historically in the West. And I've only been talking about the West. And so the idea that we have grown up with Valentine's Day and this idea that most of us as married, we're the ones that are celebrating Valentine's Day, and our husband's kind of lucky if we got the card, right? But we're sort of making I put it out there. I have a very large cookie cutter in a heart shape, and I would cut the toast into heart shape, and I would make my egg in heart shape, and I would serve it to him on Valentine's, and he was just impressed that I was making bacon and eggs for Valentine's Day. It never dawned on him that they were heart-shaped. I think he just thought they came out unusual that year.
So some people can't see the symbolism.
Yeah,
some
yes.
people see that, yeah.
And some of us read it all the time. And it's kind of fun. I mean, and it's the same thing when you're looking at something, you're saying, is it, what is the symbolism? What does it mean? And I, as I said, the detective in me wants to know what it means, the curiosity. I want to go down deep. I want to find out more about it. I want to, examine it.
Well, I like that we've kind of come from, the feminine aspect of the heart, which ties in nicely to the beginning of your work, which is around, women's art. The idea that it was, oh my goodness, so dismissed.
It was so dismissed. I mean, it becomes folk art in the 18th century, and we see it on carvings. The Odd Fellows Association, Imperial Order of the Odd Fellows, would have the hand and the heart. All right, that's the Odd Fellows sign. Yep. So you see the eyeball, and then you get the hand and the heart. It shows up on birth certificates in Pennsylvania Dutch, and that would all be made by men. The birth certificates and the wedding announcements would have the hearts on them as well. And it sort of becomes this sort of universal symbol of, again, sort of togetherness, to family, to holding. And again, if it's just, think about it, it's the hands holding as well. Our two hands are together. We're sort of holding things. We're nurturing things that way. It doesn't matter who you are. It's that coming together.
And I'm just thinking about it now in, there's so much, we have to be careful, I think, or for me anyway, as a sensitive person getting, I can't do too much news, for example, or too much things like that. But if I see a heart, even just out of the corner of my eye for a minute, it kind of just calms my nervous second. Maybe not the, heart stabby with swords and maybe not that heart.
It's that icon. I mean, it's that we just read it immediately. All right. We know what it is. It's sort of like looking at a star or the sun or the moon. All right. Those are things that are comforting in our lives. And the heart has become one of those.
And you mentioned rebus, the idea of it becoming a verb, or heart equals love. My daughter and I still write the I, then a heart, and the letter U. I heart you. So yeah.
And I did a rebus the other day, which was, I decided I didn't want to I did the heart, but then I figured that was going to be too simple. So I did I, and then I did a picture of a door. One door. I adore you.
Ah,
all right.
Well, I adore you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled. I feel like I know so much more, which is great. And the idea that I just love that you've spent your life being curious and now able to share this and tell stories. And yeah, what a wonderful teacher you were. I continue to be.
Well, I love it. I love sharing stories. It's a sort of a storyteller, and it's the good things.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, if you're watching and you like what you're hearing, please like us, follow us. You can reach Dr. Jennifer Salahub at your Instagram handle is, what is it again?
Dear God, it's Crafty Historian.
Crafty Historian.
And I am promising to actually figure out how to use it.
Well, right. You'd best figure that out. Crafty Historian, at Crafty Historian. We're at Secret Heart Broadcasting. Jennifer, thank you so very much. And I'm looking forward to the next time a little heart crosses my path. I'll think of you. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please tell your friends.